Morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin and this is Maggie. And today's topic is being right. Before we get started, sorry, I just need to apologize for being late this morning. We had some technical difficulties and had to reboot the computer, and it took a long time. So I apologize for that. So let's, before we get into today's topic, let's take a minute to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clear, crisp oxygen just flooding into your lungs and flowing into your bloodstream and nourishing your cells and your organs and bringing vital life energy throughout your entire being. And as you exhale, exhale any stress, any tension, any negativity, any fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And this time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, electrifying and energizing every electron, every molecule, illuminating every cell. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension and stress, fatigue, negativity. And now let's just gently press our palms together and softly, softly rub our fingers against our palms and feel the deliciousness of that sensation and allow yourselves to become present right here, right now. Welcome, welcome. Again, I'm sorry for the lateness. Just at the very last minute, as I was trying to go live, everything just locked up. So I had to reboot. And so here we are. Today's topic is being right. And I want to talk about the line between being right and holding your position and holding your integrity, and also the other side of that, being right in such a way that it can cost us relationships and connection. And I think when we're passionate about things, sometimes those passions, um, did I already say good morning to you guys? I don't even know if I did, so I'm going to say good morning again. Good morning, Lisa. Good morning, Rosalind. Good morning, Tammy. And good morning to everybody else who's joining us this morning. It's great to be here with you. And I just, we're talking about being right and being authentic in our communication, and also uh, finding that place where sometimes it's more important to maintain connection than it is to be right. And it doesn't always have to be a choice between one or the other either. We can still maybe hold a position with open hand rather than with clenched fists. So as I think this is an important conversation right now for the times that we're in. I had a really interesting conversation yesterday with someone who has been very, very engaged with the protests in Columbus, Ohio. And Columbus, Ohio has the really unfortunate distinction right now of being the number one city in police murder, where police have killed um, so, people that they are arresting. And so there are lots and lots of protests right now in Columbus, and there's a lot of animosity between the police and the protesters. And so the conversation was a little bit about this topic of being right and the cost of that. So there's no question that that the people who are protesting have a right to be angry, and there are legitimate complaints, and the conversation that we had is similar to a conversation that we were touching on last week, which is the power of anger to well, actually, I think it was yesterday where we were talking about time is just an illusion for me. I have to tell you. I think it was yesterday where we were talking about how anger can be a really powerful tool to quell or to silence opposition, but it doesn't transform opposition. And at least typically it doesn't. So, Maggie, she's eating that plant again. Maggie, no. See, when I'm not online, she listens to me and she doesn't even go over there. But when I'm online with you, she knows that she can get away with going over and eating this plant. I have to grab her. I'll be see, she knew I was coming, so she left the plant. Anyway, thank you for your patience with that. So what we were talking about, and now she's right back at the plant. Maggie, no. Maggie. She's not listening. Hold on one second. I'm so sorry. So thank you for your patience. This is the cost of having, I'm glad you find it funny, Rosalind. I find it funny, but I also find it maddening, I have to tell you, because she's smart enough. She knows. Maggie, come here, baby. Come here. She's smart enough. She knows that she can get away with stuff. It's funny. Anyway, so we were talking about how the in this situation, which is such an explosive, incendiary kind of situation, it seems to be accelerating between the opposition seems to be accelerating, and there are factional groups that are showing up that are also increasing the opposition. Good morning, Isabel. I'm glad you find it funny too. You guys are so patient with me. I appreciate it. She's back at the plant again. Maggie, no. Maggie. So sometimes the clapping helps. In this case, it did. So good girl, Maggie. Anyway, anybody who hasn't tuned in before will think I'm a nutcase talking to this disembodied spirit here somewhere, but hopefully she'll show her face on screen soon. Anyway, we were talking about the power of love, and I could have called this morning's conversation the power of love, but when we think about love is not just all sunshine and roses. I think we talked about this yesterday too, and the power of love is something that can that really can transform. Yes, Dennis, she is Maggie. She is naughty Maggie, indeed. Anyway, so I think that the stand, the outrage that people feel is justified. And I'm wondering, like that being right is can carry with it a righteousness, a righteousness that perpetuates separation and can propel the difference into even greater depths, I think. And I'm wondering, where is that line? Where can we draw the line between losing our integrity, by like in our rightness? Can we find a way, a path of connection that goes beyond right and wrong? Because when we're right, um, by definition, it kind of it creates that something else is wrong. And I'm not saying there aren't rights and wrongs. I mean, there are, but that may be a gross oversimplification of things, to try and paint it with a brush of black and white, like that's just wrong. Well, there are things that are just wrong, but it's more complicated than that. Perhaps it's not while that evaluation may be simple and even correct, it can also be incomplete. That there are so many factors at play, and based on um, different vantage points, the perspectives change. And I'm wondering, what we were looking at is how to make inroads into this very fraught and oppositional environment and circumstance, and by being righteously outraged and right, there it's not going to lead to the desired transformation. It kind of can't, because it perpetuates the opposition. And I'm wondering, like how, I think that this is truly a conversation for the times. How do we transcend these differences to get to the the desired outcome? And so we were talking about reconciliation, and I it brought to mind, these battles between peoples, where both sides have really legitimate grievances. And I'm talking about, for instance, in the Middle East, where the Israelis and the Palestinians, there's all kinds of historical tensions and wrongs on both sides. And I we were talking about how anger is a response to fear, oftentimes. And I I think that there's a conversation here about combinations of fear and injustice and um, morality and values, and looking at a situation with a new eye, to say what is underneath this this um, conflict. And being right is often a response, like digging our heels in is really what I'm talking about when I'm today, at least when I'm talking about being right. It's like I'm right and you're wrong. And I'm going to dig in my heels, and I am going to stand for this thing that I am right about. And um, I, I, I want to explore with you how we can create a new paradigm, how we can create a new model for conflict resolution. Like war is not conflict resolution. War is coming from an old model of domination, right? And conquering and uh, submission, domination and submission. And I think that this is maybe the topic is not so much being right as conflict resolution. Like, how on a grand scale can we approach this issue? How can we transform our ways of being such that we really are looking to create a new paradigm, a new way of being together, a new way of being with each other, a new way of working through our differences. So there are some magnificent, miraculous stories about people who have been victims at the hands of others, coming to reconciliation with those others, and those others also having suffered the consequence of their actions that were so devastating. And also, for instance, between Israelis and Palestinians, where people have sat down at the same table and been able to connect with each other as human beings, and then transcend their preconceived notions and hatreds and attitudes toward one another. Lisa says, I can't imagine being a mother of color. I'd be terrified every time my kids left the house. By the way, they're going about changing, but the way they're going about changing it is wrong. And the they is all of us. The they is all of us. Like, how do we go about changing? Protesting is an important form of expression, as long as we're able to maintain nonviolent protests, right? But then there's violence also there's like an assumption of violence even before violence breaks out. There's an assumption of violence on the part of law enforcement in many, many cases. That's law enforcement, right? Not peacekeeping. And I think that the way that we think about these things is pivotal to the way that we act on them and the way that we show up in the world. If I'm there as a law enforcer, what is, even in the name, I'm there to enforce, and there is a show of force, right? There is enforcement against danger versus peacekeeper. A peacekeeper is there to stop the expressions of violence, right? Rosalind says, being right might come from wanting to get into the validation of why one way is right and the other way is wrong. So interesting. I'm not sure where to take that. So being right might come from wanting to get into the validation of why one way is right and the other way is wrong. So and to your point, Rosalind, when we get into validating or justifying, what we're doing is we're having an argument. We're not listening, and we're not connecting. We're not creating a dialogue. And I think what happens in being right is it's not about, to your point, it's not about a conversation. It's not about a discussion. It's about defending our position. And so when we have a situation like what's happened with some of the protests that um, are very, very highly charged, highly emotionally charged. Um, what happens is both sides are justifying their position, and then because they are justifying their position, they're justifying their behavior. And I think that there's such an acceleration of emotion in this being right, like the righteousness of being right, that we often create further separation, when what our desired outcome is unity. Like is understanding. So like if you and I are having a conversation, and we're seeing that we think differently about certain things, then that can escalate into an argument, right? Where you're being right and I'm being right, and neither of us is communicating or understanding or connecting with the vantage point for the other, right? And so one of the things that we can do when we're being right is to recognize that the other person that is being right also has a very strong perspective, and maybe there's an opening available to us by entertaining their perspective, to try to step into. Maggie, no. Maggie, she's not even listening to the clapping now. Maggie, no. Good girl. Sorry about that. So that poor plant, it's got to learn how to fight back. Maggie, no. Maggie, she's just over there. Maggie, Maggie, come on, no. Good girl. So Lisa says differences make the world go round. I think that that's probably true, and I think there's a difference between, at least what I'm talking about today, there's a difference between difference and being right, because we can make allowances for differences. Um, we can appreciate differences, but when we're being right in this sense of being righteously right, what we do is we tend to exacerbate or create opposition, to create opposition. So there's a big difference between difference and opposition. There's a big difference between you having an opinion and me having an opinion, and both of us sort of recognizing each other's perspective, while at the same time um, still agreeing to disagree. There's a difference between that and being right, like being righteously right. And even as I'm expressing it physically, being righteously right, look at my hands, they're fists. It's like I'm holding on to my vantage point and my opinion no matter what. And as I'm doing that, is there any room here for me to hold your hand? There isn't, right? Because I'm holding on to my opinion or my belief, and at the exclusion of our ability to connect. So it's a matter of degree, really, that I'm addressing this morning. And I think it is a really important thing. Like, where's that line? Where's the line where I can entertain what your what where you are and your perspective, um, but where is the point at which I lose my integrity? Where is the point at which I am out of alignment with myself in entertaining or having an openness to your perspective. So one thing that I notice is that people, and I've experienced this myself, when we feel threatened, when our ideas and our beliefs and our sense of ourself feels threatened, then we become more rigid, we become more righteous, we become more more intractable. And so this is really more a conversation to provoke question and self-observation, and to invite us to be looking collectively at how we can evolve to a new way of being with our differences, with the things that we get so righteously right about, our righteous indignation. There's a lot to be righteously indignant about, and at the same time, how is that righteous indignation going to resolve the issue? So I guess I'm inviting us all to be looking at how to step into that place of love, as we are able to step into that love is a cleansing fire too. It's not just sweetness and light, it is a transformative power, and I believe that that's a higher calling for us to aspire to be able to move into the power of love to create transformation. So Lisa says, do you think we'll see racial equality and become one ever in our lifetime? Wow. Lisa, we can dream. We can dream. We can envision it. And we can look into ourselves and our own behaviors and our own judgments and our own values to make choices for that unity. um, I think there's a lot more of a hard road for us to go through before we get to that place. uh, I think there we get to have more of a reckoning within ourselves and with each other before that happens. uh, we can only we could only dream. We can dream that future into being. I have seen radical transformation in my life so far, uh, and I still see that we have such a long way to go. Isabel says it doesn't. We all need to change socially. I'm not sure what it doesn't is referencing, but we all need to change society in order to stop judgment and embrace differences and grow to a higher stage of being, learning with them. Only love heals everything. And I think, in your statement, Isabel, that what we get to transform is the notion of them, because the notion of them is founded in the notion of other and the notion of separation. So the other people, them being the authority, or them being the other country, or them being those of another race, or them being of different um, gender orientation. So, when we get to erase them enough to be us, now you know, I'm not looking to erase our difference, because there's magic in our difference as well. I'm not looking to paint everything with the same brush, but I am saying that perhaps the notion of them as other, rather than them as part of me, them as other is something that we get to erase and to come from a place of connection with one another. So that is the vision and the dream, that we can appreciate and value our differences while recognizing our unity. So um, Lisa says, I sometimes think we're headed to another Kent State. I pray we don't, but them, but yeah. So Lisa, that seems to be what's happening right now in Columbus, is things seem to be getting more and more fiery with some radical groups showing up uh, at these, like with white nationalist groups showing up at these protests and being more emboldened to assert their racism, and more tensions in the between the police and the protesters. And it does feel like it may be accelerating, and I hope that we find a way to diffuse it before it gets to a place where more lives are lost. So Isabel says them, it was related to differences, right? So there's the them that is the separating them, and there's the them that is part of our family, and I think we get to be be not the us and them, but the we them, if that makes any sense. And Isabel says, if we can overcome the need of being right, we will get it as a collective. I think so. I think as we recognize that from my vantage point, I may be right, and from your vantage point, you may be right. And both of our vantage points, neither of our vantage points are the whole picture or the whole truth. And the rightness isn't what's going to bring us to resolution, right? So, yeah, it's definitely food for thought, folks, right? Right? Talking about being right. So, I think that's it for today. I hope we've planted some seeds about this notion of right and wrong and righteousness and connection, and us and them moving from opposition to connection and communion with one another. I think that that's one of the biggest shifts that this time is bringing forward for us, is the need to recognize that as different as we may be, we are one human family here. Um, Lisa says, you provide so many thoughts in me when you speak. In the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Sidney Poitier has a line that has stuck with me. He tells his father, the difference between me and you is you see yourself as a Black man. I see myself as a man. I think that's so prophetic. I think so too, Lisa. And I think also, I think that there is tremendous value in maintaining our cultural identities too, like to preserve the richness of culture. And I'm wondering if if there's a way to be able to do that and celebrate all these cultural varieties and still recognize that we are all part of one human family. So it's kind of a paradoxical thing in a way, but I believe that that it's where we need to go as human beings on this planet in order to survive and collectively thrive, without necessarily um, without necessarily, the word that's coming to mind is assimilating, but that's not really the right word. Uh, Co-opting our traditions and our culture. So Isabel says, special at these times where what we see and it seems it can be not what it is. Exactly. What we're seeing is dictated by the filters through which we process information, right? And so those filters are not necessarily truth. So, yes, Lisa says, I'm sorry, Isabel says we are living manipulation at its best. In a lot of ways, there is a lot of manipulation going on through the press, through what we hear in the news, through the way that we are fed information through social media, through what is being censored or not censored. There's a lot of there is a lot of manipulation, and I wonder, if this manipulation is part of a grand plan, or if perhaps uh, it's just not particularly long game kind manipulation. That it's more reactive type manipulation, perhaps. And Lisa says blending. Yeah, so I think there is a notion of blending. And how do we that's a great topic, actually, is how do we become connected and one with one another, and re- relieve ourselves of the opposition that we have, while at the same time uh, cherishing and celebrating the many differences that we have and that we are. And Isabel says, we are watching a show big time. Just we're all in it. Yes, it's true. It's true. And Isabel says, and racism and activist actions are part of it. Yes. So all of it is action reaction. We're seeing it play out on all different levels. And maybe we can talk about that tomorrow, the microcosm and the macrocosm. So Isabel says, we are not a nation of such racism anymore. Isabel, I forget where you're from, but I think in the US, we are confronting our racism. I think that it's always been there, and that now it's becoming there's something new in the conversation. And actually, the conversation's been going on since the 60s, but it feels like finally maybe there's there's maybe some new light in the conversation. At least that's my hope and prayer. It's been a long time coming. So Isabel says Portuguese background. Thank you. So that's I think we get to really evolve. This is a time where we're being called to move into a new way of being, for sure. In order for us to survive collectively on the planet, we need to find a way to work together. And I think that requires respecting differences. So Isabel says, I feel we all want to be in peace with it. Well, I think there are all different feelings. I think that some people feel that the differences are irreconcilable, and that's something that we get to change, because with irreconcilable when unless we can find a place of acceptance and peace with irreconcilable differences, then irreconcilable differences are a breeding ground for hatred. So, there has to be some degree of tolerance that we cultivate. And the question is, how do we go about that? And I don't have an answer. I think it's a very incremental evolution, and we get to we get to start with ourselves and recognize, our own righteous rightness, and to look at where there might be grounds for bridges, how to be building bridges. So Lisa says, we're all so much smarter than this. It's 2021, time to figure this out. I am with you 1,000%, Lisa. I agree. It's like enough already. Let's grow the heck up, right? I cleaned that up for you guys. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. Um, yes. So being right, the conversation came after the conversation yesterday about the shadow. So we're kind of digging into these primal forces in our lives this week so far. We'll see what tomorrow brings. So Isabel says, me neither, but we're ready for it because we don't want to be plagued with our sicknesses as a society. I agree 100%. So that's it for today, guys. I'm Mira Rubin. This is Maggie. And we go live each weekday. Oh, this is the Core Connection. And we go live each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network. And until next time, let's look at how we can prioritize communication over being right. So